The newspaper ad was tiny, tucked between a listing for used farming equipment and someone selling puppies. Housekeeper wanted. Remote mountain location, room and board included, must be comfortable with isolation. The pay was decent, nothing special, but it came with free housing. That last part caught my attention because my landlord had just raised my rent for the third time in 2 years, and I was running out of options. I'd been cleaning houses for almost 5 years by then. Rich people's homes mostly, the kind where you had to take your shoes off at the door and use special cloths for the granite countertops. The work was fine, but the people treated you like furniture. They'd have entire conversations in front of you like you weren't even there. Sometimes they'd leave money on the counter as a test, just to see if you'd take it. I never did, but it still felt gross knowing they were testing me. The agency I worked for took half my pay, and after rent and bills, I had barely enough left to eat. My sister kept telling me to get a real job, whatever that meant. As if scrubbing toilets wasn't real work. As if my aching knees and raw hands were imaginary. So when I saw that ad, something inside me just decided. I called the number before I could talk myself out of it. A woman answered, her voice all business. She said the position was for a Mr. Cole Brennan who lived up in the mountains, about 3 hours north. He needed someone to keep his cabin clean, cook meals, and basically keep the place running. The last housekeeper had quit after 2 weeks. And the one before that lasted a month. That should have been my first warning sign. But instead I heard myself asking when I could start. The woman on the phone seemed surprised I was interested. She scheduled an interview for the following Tuesday and gave me directions that involved county roads I'd never heard of. When I told my sister about it that night, she looked at me like I'd lost my mind. You're going to go live in the mountains with some strange man? Do you want to end up on a murder podcast? I laughed it off, but her words stuck with me. Still, what choice did I have? Stay in the city and slowly go broke? I was 28 years old and had nothing to show for it except calluses and a beat-up car that needed new brakes. The drive up took longer than expected. The highway turned into smaller roads, then into gravel paths that wound through thick forests. My car rattled over potholes and I kept checking my phone, watching the signal bars disappear one by one. The directions ended at a gate with a call box. I pressed the button and waited. Nothing happened for a long minute. Then a man's voice came through, gravelly and short. Yeah, I'm here for the interview. The housekeeper position, another pause. Then the gate creaked open. The driveway went on forever, climbing higher into the mountains. Trees pressed in on both sides, so thick they blocked out most of the sunlight. Finally, the woods opened up and I saw the cabin. Except calling it a cabin felt wrong. It was huge, made of dark wood and stone with a wraparound porch and windows that reflected the gray sky. I parked next to a truck that looked like it had seen better days. Before I could even get out, the front door opened, and a man stepped onto the porch. He was tall, maybe in his early 40s, with dark hair that needed cutting and a beard that was more practical than stylish. He wore a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up and jeans that had actual dirt on them, not the fashionable kind. But it was his expression that threw me. He looked annoyed, not just tired or busy, but genuinely irritated that I was there. You're late, he said. I checked my phone, which was now completely dead. I don't think so. You said 1 o'clock? It's 1:15. I bit back a dozen responses and just nodded. Sorry, the roads were rough. He stared at me for another moment, then turned and walked back inside, leaving the door open. I guess that was my invitation to follow. The inside of the cabin was dark and cold. Not dirty exactly, but neglected. Dust covered most surfaces, and dishes were piled in the sink. The furniture was nice, but looked like no one had cared for it in months. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, but it was empty and cold. He led me to the kitchen, gestured at a chair, and I sat. He didn't offer coffee or water, just stood there with his arms crossed, looking at me like I was wasting his time. You have experience? He asked. 5 years cleaning houses. I can cook basic meals, do laundry, whatever you need. The job's not hard. Keep the place clean, make meals, don't bother me. I work from home and I need quiet. No music, no TV during the day, no guests. Okay. You'll have your own room upstairs. There's a bathroom up there too. Stay out of my office and my bedroom. You get weekends off, but you're still expected to make breakfast those days. I nodded, even though the terms were getting worse by the second. Last girl quit because she said it was too quiet up here, said she got lonely. He said it like it was the stupidest thing he'd ever heard. You got a problem with quiet? No. You got a boyfriend who's gonna come visit every weekend? No. Good, I don't need drama. He looked me over one more time and I could see him deciding. You can start Monday. Bring whatever you need. I don't go into town much, so stock up on anything personal you want. That's it? Don't you want references, or you want the job or not? I should have said no. Should have gotten back in my car and driven down that mountain and never looked back. But I thought about my apartment with its thin walls and broken heater. I thought about my sister's pitying looks and my empty bank account. I want it. Fine. Be here by 8 Monday morning. He walked me back to the door, and just before I left, he said, "Don't expect this to be easy. I'm not good with people and I like things a certain way. If you can't handle that, save us both the trouble and don't show up." I drove back down the mountain as the sun started to set, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. What had I just agreed to? 3 hours from anyone I knew, living with a man who seemed to hate the world in a place so remote my phone didn't even work. But maybe that was exactly what I needed. A reset. A break from everything that wasn't working. How bad could it really be? It was just cleaning and cooking. I'd been doing that for years. I spent the weekend packing my life into boxes and bags. I didn't have much. Some clothes, books, my laptop, and a few photos. My sister helped me load the car, lecturing me the whole time about safety and making sure I called her every day. "I'm serious," she said as I got ready to leave. "If anything feels wrong, you leave. Promise me." I promise. Monday morning came too fast. I drove back up that mountain, my car loaded down with everything I owned. The gate was already open this time. When I parked, Cole was standing on the porch. Same annoyed expression, like I was already disappointing him and I hadn't even started yet. "You're late again," he said. I checked the clock on my dashboard. 7:58. It's not 8 yet. Close enough. He turned and went inside. I grabbed my first bag and followed him in, wondering what on earth I'd gotten myself into. The next few months were going to be interesting, that was for sure. Whether they'd be the brightest days of my life, that seemed impossible. But I was about to find out. The first week was brutal. Not because the work was hard, but because Cole seemed determined to make me quit. He'd inspect everything I cleaned, running his finger along surfaces looking for dust. He'd taste the food I cooked and just grunt, never saying if it was good or bad. And the silence. The awful, heavy silence that filled every room. He worked in his office most of the day doing something on his computer. I never asked what. That first morning I'd tried to make conversation while serving him breakfast, and he'd looked at me like I'd started speaking another language. "I work better in silence," he said. And that was the end of that. So I cleaned in silence, vacuumed in silence, cooked in silence. By the third day I was so desperate for human interaction that I called my sister just to hear another voice. "How's Mountain Man?" she asked. Imagine the grumpiest person you've ever met, then multiply that by 10. That bad? He acts like I'm a constant inconvenience. This morning I asked if he wanted coffee and he looked offended that I'd spoken. My sister laughed, but it wasn't funny when you were living it. I'd dealt with rude clients before, but at least I could leave at the end of the day. Here there was nowhere to go. Just endless trees in that cold, dark cabin. The cabin itself was beautiful, I had to admit. Once I got past the neglect, I could see someone had built it with care. The woodwork was incredible, all hand-carved beams and custom shelving. The stone fireplace had a mantel made from a single piece of wood, probably from some ancient tree. But it felt like a museum, not a home. There were no photos, no personal touches, nothing that said someone actually lived here. My room was upstairs, small but comfortable. A bed, a dresser, a window that looked out over the forest. I could hear animals at night, things moving in the darkness. Sometimes it was peaceful. Sometimes it was terrifying. By the end of the first week, I'd established a routine. Up at 6, make coffee, start breakfast. Cole came down at 7 exactly, never earlier or later. He'd eat, grunt something that might have been thanks, and disappear into his office. I'd clean, do laundry, prep lunch. He'd emerge at noon, eat, disappear again. Dinner at 6. Then he'd sit on the porch for exactly 1 hour before going to bed. The man ran his life like a military operation, and heaven help me if I disrupted the schedule. On Friday afternoon, I was dusting the bookshelf in the living room when I noticed the books. I'd been too busy cleaning to pay attention before, but now I actually looked at them. Technical manuals, books on carpentry and wilderness survival, nothing unexpected. But then I found a whole section of novels. Classic literature, modern fiction, even some poetry. It didn't match the grumpy mountain man image at all. Those aren't for decoration? Cole's voice came from behind me, making me jump. I was just dusting. Right. He grabbed one of the books, something by Steinbeck, and walked away. That night, I heard music coming from downstairs. Just for a moment, something classical and beautiful. Then it cut off abruptly. I wondered if he'd forgotten I was there, broken his own rule about silence. The second week was slightly better, or maybe I was just getting used to the isolation. Cole still barely spoke to me, but I started to notice small things, like how he'd leave his dishes neatly stacked instead of scattered, how he'd stomp his boots extra hard on the porch mat so I wouldn't have to clean up mud. Tiny considerations that he'd never admit to. I also started exploring the property during my breaks. There was a path behind the cabin that led to a clearing with the most incredible view. You could see mountains stretching forever, layers of blue and gray and green. I'd sit on a fallen log and just breathe, letting the quiet settle into my bones in a good way. One afternoon, I was coming back from the clearing when I saw Cole working outside. He'd set up some kind of workshop near the garage and was building something, sawdust covering his arms. I tried to walk past without bothering him, but he called out, "You know anything about sanding?" I stopped. "A little. Why?" "Come here, it wasn't a request." I walked over and he handed me a piece of sandpaper. The project was a bookshelf, beautiful, even half-finished. Sand with the grain, not against it. Steady pressure. He demonstrated, his hands sure and practiced. We worked in silence for about an hour. It was oddly comfortable, the rasp of sandpaper and the smell of fresh wood. When we finished, my arms ached, but the wood was smooth as glass. "Not bad," he said, which from Cole might as well have been high praise. After that, things shifted slightly. He still didn't talk much, but sometimes he'd ask me to help with projects. Always wordlessly, just a gesture or a grunt. I'd hold boards while he cut them, or hand him tools or help carry things. It wasn't friendship, but it was something. I learned his patterns, how he'd pace when he was working through a problem, how he'd stand on the porch during storms, watching the rain like it was the most interesting thing in the world, how he took his coffee black, no sugar, hot enough to burn. The third week, I made stew for dinner. My grandmother's recipe, the kind that takes all day and fills the house with smell. Cole came to the kitchen at 6 as usual, but he stopped in the doorway. "What is that?" "Beef stew." "Is something wrong?" He didn't answer, just sat down. I served him, nervous for some reason. He took a bite, then another. Then he ate the entire bowl without stopping. "There's more," I said. He let me refill his bowl. When he finished, he looked at me directly for maybe the first time since I'd arrived. "My mother used to make stew like this. Is that good or bad?" "Good." He stood up, carried his dishes to the sink, and paused. "Thank you." Those 2 words felt monumental. I smiled despite myself. "You're welcome." After that night, he started staying in the kitchen a few minutes longer after meals. Not talking, just present. I'd wash dishes and he'd dry them. Still silent, but it was a comfortable silence now, not the hostile kind. I started to understand that Cole wasn't cruel. He was wounded. Something had happened to make him retreat up here, away from everything and everyone. The way he flinched when I got too close. The way he'd stare at nothing sometimes, lost in thoughts that looked painful. Whatever his story was, it had teeth, but I didn't push. I'd learned that much in my years cleaning houses. Everyone has their secrets, their private pain. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is just exist near someone without demanding explanations. One morning I came downstairs to find Cole already in the kitchen making coffee. He'd never done that before. He handed me a cup, made exactly how I liked it. I must have looked shocked because he almost smiled. "I pay attention," he said. It was such a small thing, but it meant he'd noticed, that I wasn't just furniture to him. The 4th week, a storm rolled in. Not just rain, but something fierce, with wind that shook the whole cabin and thunder that rattled the windows. The power went out around midnight. I was in my room trying not to panic in the complete darkness when I heard a knock. "You okay?" Cole's voice through the door. "Yeah, just dark. Come downstairs. I've got a fire going." I felt my way down the stairs. The living room was lit by firelight, and Cole had brought blankets and pillows out. It looked almost cozy. Storm's supposed to last all night. Might as well be comfortable. He handed me a blanket and took the chair across from me. We sat there for hours, watching the fire and listening to the storm. At some point, Cole started talking. Not about anything personal, just observations. About the weather patterns up here. about the animals in the forest, about how he'd built parts of the cabin himself. I listened, surprised by how much he knew, how thoughtful he was when he wasn't being defensive. His voice in the darkness was different, softer. "Why'd you take this job?" he asked suddenly. "Needed a change. Got tired of the city." That's not the whole truth. He was right. I took a breath. I was tired of being invisible, of working so hard and having nothing to show for it, of people treating me like I didn't matter. Cole was quiet for a moment. "And up here?" "Up here I'm still invisible sometimes, but at least it's honest." He laughed, actually laughed, and it transformed his whole face. "That's fair." When the storm finally passed and dawn started to break, we were both half asleep by the dying fire. Cole stood up, stretched. "Thanks for the company," he said. "Thanks for the fire." He nodded and headed upstairs. I stayed a few minutes longer, watching the sun rise through the windows, and realized something strange. I was happy. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I was actually happy. This isolated cabin with its grumpy owner had somehow become more of a home than anywhere I'd lived in years. And the brightest days of my life? Maybe they weren't so impossible after all. The morning after the storm, I woke up to the smell of bacon. I came downstairs to find Cole in the kitchen, actually cooking. He glanced at me, looking almost embarrassed. "Figured I could handle breakfast for once," he said. "You were up late." "You were too." "Yeah, but you're the one who has to clean up my messes all day." It was the closest thing to a joke I'd heard from him. I sat down and he served me breakfast. It was simple but good. We ate together in what had become our usual silence, except now it felt different, like we'd crossed some invisible line during the storm. Over the next few weeks, the cabin started feeling alive. I opened windows to let in fresh air. I picked wildflowers from the property and put them in jars around the house. I even talked Cole into letting me rearrange the living room so it caught the afternoon light better. He grumbled about change and how things were fine the way they were. But I noticed him sitting in that sunny spot every afternoon after that, reading his books. One day I was in town getting groceries and I passed a shop selling plants. On impulse, I bought some herbs: basil, rosemary, thyme. When I got back, Cole helped me set up a little garden by the kitchen window. "My mom had one of these," he said, carefully pressing soil around the basil. "Said store-bought herbs had no soul." "Was she a good cook?" "The best." His face softened. "She could make anything taste like home." It was the most personal thing he'd shared. I wanted to ask more, but I could see him pulling back, so I just smiled and kept planting. The herbs grew fast in the mountain sun. I started using them in everything, and the cabin filled with the smell of fresh cooking. Cole never said anything, but I noticed he'd sometimes just stand in the kitchen, breathing in the scents with his eyes closed. Summer arrived properly, bringing longer days and warmer nights. Cole started teaching me things: how to identify different trees by their bark, which mushrooms were safe to eat and which would kill you, how to read the weather by watching the clouds. He'd lived up here for 5 years, he told me, and had learned every inch of the mountain. "What did you do before?" I asked one afternoon as we hiked to check on a broken fence. "I was an architect. Designed buildings in the city." "Really? That's so different from this." "That's the point." His voice went hard. That life nearly destroyed me. I didn't push, but later that week he opened up a little more. We were on the porch watching the sunset, a routine we'd fallen into. He'd bring out 2 beers and we'd sit in the rocking chairs he'd built, just existing together. "I was engaged," he said suddenly, 5 years ago. "Wedding planned, house bought, whole future mapped out." I waited, sensing there was more. She left 3 weeks before the wedding. Said she couldn't marry someone who worked all the time, who cared more about buildings than people. Said I was cold. He took a long drink. She wasn't wrong. "I'm sorry, don't be." She did the right thing. I was miserable, and I was making her miserable. After that, I just couldn't do it anymore. The city, the job, pretending to be someone I wasn't. So I left, built this place with my own hands, and figured I'd just live out here alone. "How's that working out?" He looked at me, something almost like a smile. "It was perfect until some housekeeper showed up and started moving my furniture around." I laughed. "You can move it back." "Nah, you were right. The light's better this way." Those porch conversations became my favorite part of the day. Cole would talk about his past sometimes, the good parts and the painful ones. I'd share stories from my years cleaning houses, the ridiculous things rich people did, the way they'd treat you like you were invisible until they needed something. "You're not invisible," Cole said one night. What? You said people treated you like you were invisible. You're not even a little bit. Something in the way he said it made my heart skip. I brushed it off as the beer and the mountain air, but the feeling stuck with me. As summer deepened, we fell into an easy rhythm. I'd work in the garden in the mornings while Cole did his computer work. He still took freelance architect jobs, he'd explained, designing custom homes for people who wanted something unique. He could do it all remotely, only going into town when he needed to meet with clients. Afternoons, we'd work on projects together. He was building a deck off the back of the cabin, and I'd help measure and carry boards. He taught me how to use power tools, patient in a way I never would have expected from grumpy Cole. "You're a natural," he said once. "Watching me drill pilot holes perfectly straight, I had a good teacher." "Nah, you just pay attention. Most people don't." One weekend, Cole announced we were going on a hike. Not just the short walks we did around the property, but a real hike up to a lake he knew about. "It's a few hours up, but worth it. You game?" I was. We packed sandwiches and water and set out early. The trail was steep, winding through dense forest and across streams. Cole moved through the terrain like he was part of it, and I struggled to keep up. He'd wait for me without comment, offering his hand over the rough spots. When we finally reached the lake, I understood why he'd brought me. It was absolutely stunning. Crystal clear water reflecting the mountains, surrounded by wildflowers and ancient trees. We were completely alone, miles from anyone else. "I come up here when I need to think," Cole said. "It's the most peaceful place I've ever found." We ate our sandwiches by the water, not talking much, just being. At some point, Cole started skipping stones across the lake, and I joined in. Mine barely skipped once before sinking. His bounced 5, 6, 7 times. "Show off," I said. "Skill," he corrected, grinning. We stayed until the sun started to set, painting the lake in gold and pink. On the hike back down, I slipped on some loose rocks. Cole caught me instantly, his arms strong and steady. "Careful," he said, but he didn't let go right away. We stood there for a moment, close enough that I could see the flecks of green in his brown eyes. Then he stepped back and we kept walking. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something had shifted on that mountain. Or maybe it had been shifting all along and I was just now noticing. The way Cole looked at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way my heart sped up when he smiled. The way this cabin, this isolated, lonely place, had become everything I needed. I was falling for him. The thought terrified me. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was my employer. I was his housekeeper. And he'd made it perfectly clear when I arrived that he wanted to be alone. That he'd been hurt and wasn't looking for anything more. But feelings don't follow logic. Mine certainly didn't. The next few days were awkward, at least for me. I kept catching myself staring at him, noticing small things. The way he'd push his hair back when he was frustrated. The rare, full smile that changed his entire face. How gentle his hands were when he worked with wood, creating beautiful things from nothing. I tried to hide it, but Cole noticed. Of course he did. He noticed everything. "You okay?" he asked one afternoon. "You seem distant." "I'm fine. Just tired." He didn't look convinced, but he let it go. That weekend, his sister called. I only heard his side of the conversation, but it was clear she was pressuring him about something. "I told you I'm not coming down for that." "You know why." "No, I don't care if everyone will be there. That's the point." He hung up, frustrated. "Family stuff?" I asked. "My sister wants me to come to some reunion thing. Keeps saying I'm wasting my life up here, that I need to rejoin society." He said the last part mockingly. "What do you think?" "I think society can manage without me just fine." "But do you miss it?" "The people, I mean." He was quiet for a long time. "I miss some things. But not enough to go back. Up here I know who I am. Down there I was pretending all the time. You don't have to pretend here." "I know." He looked at me, really looked at me. "That's one of the reasons I'm glad you stayed." My breath caught. Before I could respond, he stood up and went inside, leaving me alone with the stars and my racing heart. I was in deep trouble. And I had no idea what to do about it. Fall arrived on the mountain like someone flipped a switch. One day it was warm and green. The next, the leaves were turning gold and red. The air got crisp and mornings required a jacket. I'd been at the cabin for almost 4 months, and it felt like a lifetime and no time at all. Cole started preparing for winter, which apparently was serious business up here. He showed me how to stack firewood properly, how to check the generator, how to stock the pantry for when the roads might be impassable for weeks. "Winter's different up here," he said. It's not like city snow. It's real and it doesn't care if you're ready or not. Sounds ominous. Just want you to know what you're getting into. Last year I was snowed in for 3 weeks straight. No power, no way out. Just me and the mountain. And you survived. Yeah, but I'm used to it. If you want to leave before it gets bad, I understand. The offer hung in the air. Part of me knew I should take it. Go back to the city, find another job. Put distance between me and these confusing feelings. But the thought of leaving made my chest ache. I'll stay, I said. If you want me to. Something flickered in his eyes. Relief, maybe. Yeah, I want you to. We spent the next few weeks getting ready. I learned to can vegetables from the garden, preserving summer for the cold months ahead. Cole taught me how to use the wood stove efficiently, how to dress in layers, all the practical things I'd need. But there were other moments too. Times when our hands would touch passing tools and we'd both freeze for a second too long. Times when I'd catch him watching me from across a room with an expression I couldn't quite read. Times when the air between us felt charged with something neither of us knew how to name. One afternoon I was in the kitchen making apple pie from the trees on the property. Cole came in and leaned against the counter watching me work. You're good at this, he said. At what, making pie? At making this place feel like home? I lived here for 4 years before you showed up and it never felt like this. Like what? Like somewhere worth being. My hand stilled on the rolling pin. Cole, I know I'm not good at this. Talking about feelings, any of it. After my engagement ended, I told myself I was done. Easier to be alone than to risk that kind of hurt again. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. But then you showed up and everything got complicated. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. Complicated how? You know how. He looked at me directly. I'm trying to be professional here. You work for me. And that means there's a line we shouldn't cross. But I'm not doing a great job of staying on my side of it. I set down the rolling pin, my hands shaking slightly. What if I don't want you to stay on your side? The words hung between us. Cole's expression shifted, something raw and vulnerable crossing his face. You should think about that, he said quietly. Really think about it. Because once we cross that line, there's no going back. And I'm not an easy person. I'm moody and difficult and I like things a certain way. I'm probably going to mess this up. I've been thinking about it for weeks, I admitted. And yeah, you're moody and difficult. You're also kind and thoughtful and you notice things nobody else does. You make me feel seen in a way I never have before. He moved closer, slowly, like he was giving me time to change my mind. When he reached me, he cupped my face in his hands, those calloused, careful hands that built beautiful things. I don't want to hurt you, he whispered. Then don't. He kissed me, soft at first, questioning, then deeper when I responded. It felt like something clicking into place, like coming home after a long journey. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. The pie's going to burn, he said. I laughed, slightly dizzy. I haven't put it in the oven yet. Oh, right. He smiled, that full smile that transformed him. I'm a little distracted. We finished making the pie together, bumping into each other in the small kitchen, stealing kisses between tasks. It felt natural and right, like we'd been doing this forever. That night we sat on the porch as usual, but everything was different. Cole held my hand, running his thumb over my knuckles. I need you to understand something, he said. This life up here away from everything, it's what I need. I can't go back to the city, to that pace, to pretending to be someone I'm not. If we do this, this is what it looks like. Quiet days, isolated winters, just us in the mountain. That sounds perfect to me. Now it does. But what about in a year? 2 years? What if you wake up one day and realize you're lonely, that you want more? Cole, I spent years surrounded by people and felt lonelier than I ever have up here. This place, this life, you, it's more than I knew I needed. He pulled me closer, and I rested my head on his shoulder, watching the stars come out. Over the next few weeks, everything shifted and nothing changed. We still had our routines, still worked on projects together, still had our quiet dinners. But now there were stolen moments, soft touches, conversations that stretched into the night. Cole was different when he let his guard down. He was funny, telling stories about his architecture projects that had me laughing until I cried. He was thoughtful, remembering tiny details about things I liked. And he was affectionate in ways I never would have expected, always finding excuses to touch me, to be near me. The first snow came in late October. I woke up to a world transformed, everything white and silent.
Cole was already up, standing at the kitchen window with coffee. Beautiful, isn't it?
He said when I joined him. It's like a different planet. We spent the day inside while snow fell steadily. Cole built a fire and we curled up together reading books, completely content. That evening I made soup and we ate by firelight, the world outside dark and hushed. This is what winter's like up here, Cole said. Days like this where you can't do anything but exist. Some people find it suffocating. And you? I find it peaceful. Even more so now. He kissed my forehead. Having you here makes it perfect. As November arrived, winter settled in properly. The roads were often icy and trips to town became rare events requiring planning. Cole showed me how to use the snowshoes and we'd trek through the forest. The world quiet except for our breathing and the crunch of snow. One afternoon, we were clearing snow from the porch when Cole suddenly stopped. Move in with me. Officially, I mean. Your room can be a guest room or whatever. Stay in mine. Is that okay? The whole employer-employee thing, you're not my employee anymore. Haven't been for a while, not really. You're my partner. In everything. He looked nervous, which was adorable. If you want to be. I pretended to think about it. Well, your room does have the better view. He laughed and picked me up, spinning me around despite the snow. Is that a yes? That's a yes. That night I moved my things into Cole's room. It felt monumental and completely natural at the same time. We fell asleep tangled together, snow falling outside, the rest of the world very far away. My sister called a few days later, her weekly check-in. When I told her about Cole, she was silent for a long moment. Are you happy? She finally asked, incredibly. Then I'm happy for you. Even if you are living in the middle of nowhere with a guy who sounds like a grumpy bear. He's my grumpy bear, I said. And Cole, overhearing, made an offended noise that made me laugh. December brought deeper snow and shorter days. We decorated the cabin for the holidays, nothing fancy, just some evergreen branches and candles. Cole carved wooden ornaments, his hands creating delicate birds and stars that we hung around the windows. On Christmas morning, I woke to find him already up, making breakfast. He'd gotten me books I'd mentioned wanting months ago, proof that he really did listen to everything. I'd made him a quilt, piecing it together in secret during the weeks he'd been working in his office. You made this? He ran his hands over it, awed. Seemed like we could use another blanket for winter. He pulled me close, his voice rough. I love it. I love you. It was the first time either of us had said it. I looked up at him. This man who'd seemed so cold and difficult when we first met and saw nothing but warmth. I love you too. Outside, snow continued to fall, wrapping us in white silence. Inside, the fire crackled and we had everything we needed. Winter deepened and we settled into a rhythm that felt like it had always existed. The world outside was harsh and cold, but inside the cabin we'd created something warm and safe. Cole was right about winter being different up here. The isolation was complete. Some weeks we didn't see another person, didn't hear anything but wind and our own voices, but it never felt lonely. Morning started slow. We'd wake tangled together under the quilt I'd made, reluctant to leave the warmth. Cole would eventually drag himself up to start the fire and make coffee, while I'd burrow deeper into blankets. He'd come back with 2 steaming mugs and we'd sit in bed, watching dawn light slowly fill the room. What do you want to do today? He'd ask, like we had endless options instead of being snowed in. Maybe finish that puzzle, read, help you with whatever you're building. Living dangerously, he'd tease. Those quiet days were everything. We'd work on our separate projects, comfortable in the silence, then come together for meals I cooked or we made together. Evenings meant the fireplace, books or cards, or just talking. Our conversations wandering from silly to serious and back again. Cole told me more about his past, the pieces he'd kept locked away. His engagement hadn't just ended, it had imploded. His fiancée had been cheating with his business partner, and he'd found out in the worst possible way. The betrayal had shattered something in him, made him question everything he'd built his life around. I thought I was doing everything right, he said one night, staring into the fire. Working hard, planning for the future, being responsible. Turns out none of it mattered. It mattered, I said. It made you who you are. Broken and hiding on a mountain. Careful and thoughtful. Able to see what's actually important. I took his hand. You're not broken, Cole, you're healing. There's a difference. He pulled me closer, pressing his face into my hair. How'd you get so wise? Years of watching people. You learn things when they think you're invisible. January brought a storm that knocked out power for a week. We lived by firelight and candles, cooking on the wood stove, rationing the generator for absolute necessities. It should have been miserable. Instead, it felt like an adventure. We played cards by lamplight, keeping score on paper since we couldn't use phones. Cole taught me chess, patient even when I made terrible moves. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He told me about buildings he'd designed, the rush of seeing something he'd imagined become real. I told him about the dreams I'd had before life beat them down, about wanting to write, to create something meaningful. So right, he said simply. It's not that easy. Why not? We've got nothing but time up here. Write whatever you want, so I started. Just journal entries at first, then stories, letting words flow without judgment. Cole would work on his designs or his woodworking while I wrote, and something about the parallel creation felt right. One morning, I showed him a story I'd written, nervous and excited. He read it carefully, then looked at me with wonder. This is really good. Like actually good. You're biased, I'm honest. Sometimes too honest, remember? He smiled. You have talent. Real talent. His belief in me was overwhelming. Nobody had ever supported my dreams like that, without question or condition. It made me want to be brave, to actually try instead of just wishing. February brought a break in the weather. The roads cleared enough for a trip to town. We loaded up for supplies, and Cole surprised me by suggesting we have dinner at the local diner. It was strange being around other people after so long. The noise, the crowding, even the bright lights felt overwhelming. But Cole held my hand under the table, steady and grounding, and slowly I adjusted. The waitress knew Cole, seemed shocked to see him with someone. Didn't think you liked people, she joked. I like this one, he said, and the simple declaration made my heart sing. On the drive home, Cole was quiet. Finally, he said, do you ever miss it? The city, having things to do, being around people? Sometimes I miss the convenience. But the city was exhausting. Everyone rushing, everyone performing. Up here feels real in a way nothing down there did. Even when we're snowed in for weeks? Especially then. I looked at him. Why, do you worry I'll leave? Sometimes. You gave up a lot to be here. I didn't give up anything that mattered. I found everything that does. He reached for my hand, driving one-handed on the snowy roads. I'm going to ask you something, and you can say no. No pressure, no expectations. My heart started racing. Okay, marry me. Not now, not in some big production. Someday when it feels right. But I want you to know that's where my heart is. This isn't temporary for me. You're it. I couldn't speak for a moment, emotions flooding through me. That was possibly the worst proposal ever, I finally managed. He laughed, relieved. I know, I panicked. I had a whole speech planned. I don't need speeches, and yes, whenever. However, yes. He pulled over, right there on the empty mountain road, and kissed me like his life depended on it. Snow was starting to fall again, and we were miles from anywhere, but nothing had ever felt more perfect. Spring came slowly to the mountain. Snow melted in patches, revealing ground that had been hidden for months. Green things started pushing through, brave and determined. We opened windows for the first time in forever, letting fresh air sweep through the cabin. My sister visited in April, curious to meet the man who'd stolen her little sister's heart. She arrived skeptical and left charmed despite herself. He's still grumpy, she told me before leaving, but he looks at you like you hung the moon. And you're happy. Really, truly happy. That's all I wanted for you. Summer returned, bringing longer days and warm nights. We worked in the garden, expanding it now that I knew what I was doing. Cole built me a writing desk for the porch, a beautiful piece of furniture that sat in the perfect spot for morning light. I wrote every day, getting braver with my words. Some of it was good, some was terrible, but all of it mattered because I was finally doing what I'd always wanted. Cole read everything, my first and biggest supporter. One evening we were sitting on the porch watching the stars come out. Almost exactly a year since I'd arrived at this cabin, scared and uncertain, answering an ad for a job nobody wanted. You know what's funny? I said, what? I thought taking this job was settling, like I was giving up on having a real life. Turns out it was the exact opposite. Cole pulled me close. Best hire I ever made. Worst interview process, though. You were terrible. I was protecting myself. Didn't work, obviously. Lucky for you. I kissed him. So when are we doing this? Doing what? Getting married. You proposed, remember? I remember. You want to do it, really? I really do. We got married in August, just us and the mountain. No fancy ceremony, no crowds. Cole's sister and mine were there, and the local judge who'd known Cole for years. We said our vows in the clearing with the incredible view, the place Cole had first taken me when I was new to this life. I wore a simple dress. Cole wore the nicest flannel he owned, which made me laugh. We exchanged rings he'd made himself, carved from wood and inlaid with stone from the mountain. They were imperfect and beautiful, just like us. That night we had dinner on the porch, just the two of us. The sisters had driven back down, leaving us to our mountain solitude. "How does it feel?" Cole asked. "Being married to a grumpy mountain man?" "Pretty perfect, actually." "How does it feel being married to your housekeeper?" "Former housekeeper. Current wife. Best friend. Love of my life." He counted them off on his fingers. "And it feels like the luckiest day of my life." We sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies dance in the growing dark. A year ago, I'd been desperate and alone, taking a job out of necessity. Now I had everything I'd never known I needed. "Thank you," I said suddenly. "For what?" "For being difficult and grumpy and making me want to quit that first week. For slowly letting me in. For seeing me when I felt invisible. For loving me. Thank you for staying. For turning this cabin into a home. For making me remember how to be human." He kissed my temple. For being brave enough to answer that ad. I thought about that tiny newspaper listing buried between farming equipment and puppies. The job nobody wanted at the cruel mountain man's cabin, except Cole wasn't cruel. He was wounded and scared, hiding from a world that had hurt him. And I wasn't looking for brightness. I was looking for survival, but we'd found each other anyway. And in this isolated place, away from everything we'd known, we'd built something real, something lasting. The brightest days of my life hadn't looked how I'd imagined. They weren't filled with excitement or adventure or grand gestures. They were quiet mornings and shared projects. They were learning to trust again, both of us. They were the slow building of a life that fit us perfectly, even if it didn't make sense to anyone else. Sometimes the job nobody wants is the one you need most. Sometimes the person everyone says is too difficult is exactly right. Sometimes getting lost on a mountain is the only way to find yourself. We sat there until the stars filled the sky, complete in our little world. Tomorrow we'd wake up and do it all again. Garden and write and build and live. Together on our mountain, happy in ways we'd never expected. And it really was the brightest kind of life, even in its simplicity. Especially in its simplicity. Because we'd chosen it, chosen each other, and that made all the difference. The cabin lights glowed warm against the dark forest. Inside was everything that mattered. Outside, the mountain kept its watch, steady and eternal. And we were home.